TIAN X Science is where science meets the unknown. And my name's TIAN. I'm from China.
Have you ever noticed a strange phenomenon? Humanity has landed on the moon and sent probes to Mars. Yet to this day, we have not truly figured out what lies hidden beneath the ocean floor, right under our feet. A growing body of research suggests that truly lost history might not be on land, but rather beneath the submerged continents. In 2001, a research vessel was conducting a sonar scan on the seafloor off the western coast of Cuba. They were not looking for ruins, but merely performing a routine submarine sonar mapping. However, the images returned by the sonar left everyone stunned. There were regular shapes, symmetrical structures, nearly vertical right angles, and geometric patterns repeating over and over. Distributed across several square kilometers, they lay quietly over 600 meters below the surface. It did not look like mountain ranges or coral reefs, but rather like something that had been artificially constructed. Researchers repeatedly zoomed in on the images for a long time. Finally, they asked the question that almost no one in their professional field dared to ask. What if something truly existed there before the ocean water arrived? This research vessel belonged to a Canadian exploration company called Advanced Digital Communications. The two project directors on board were Paulina Zalitsky and her husband, Paul Weinsweig. Commissioned by the Cuban government, they were mapping offshore areas for resource exploration. The entire mission was originally devoid of any mystery, just an ordinary commercial survey. That was until the sonar data came back and stunned everyone. The screen showed a large area of suspected stone building structures distributed on the seafloor, covering an area of about 2 square kilometers. Some were shaped like pyramids, while others looked like roads, or at least straight elongated structures. Arranged in a grid-like pattern, they featured numerous right angles and repeating geometric shapes. Given the sonar resolution at the time, these structures were difficult to explain through normal geological processes. The couple were not archaeologists, a point they constantly emphasized themselves. Therefore, they invited geologists to join the study and later brought in underwater archaeologists. The research team deployed a remotely operated underwater vehicle equipped with a camera to film these structures up close. The footage revealed smooth and flat stone surfaces, massive blocks with flat tops, and structures that appeared to be artificially carved or processed. In 2002, they published their preliminary findings and held a press conference. This incident briefly became international news. Subsequently, the scientific community exhibited the most typical reaction when faced with discoveries that challenge existing paradigms, demanding more evidence. However, as further evidence failed to materialize, public attention gradually shifted elsewhere. Cuban waters are strictly regulated. Any further investigation requires government approval, international cooperation, and massive financial support. These conditions were ultimately unsustainable for the initial research team. As a result, subsequent expeditions were extremely limited, and the existing video footage remained controversial. Many geologists proposed an alternative explanation, suggesting these structures might simply be volcanic intrusions, crystalline basalt, or landforms created by rocks naturally fracturing in regular directions. Although these explanations cannot fully account for all phenomena, the lack of genuine archaeological excavation was enough to shelve the entire event temporarily. To this day, these mysterious structures on the Cuban seafloor remain untouched. There have been no formal excavations and no official conclusions. They simply sleep at a depth of 600 meters in the Caribbean Sea. But perhaps the truly profound question is not whether those structures were built by humans, as that remains unanswered. The more important question is, if buildings truly exist there, when were they constructed? Being located 600 meters below today's sea level means that the area was once above water, and that would have been an incredibly long time ago. When you follow this line of inquiry, the whole narrative becomes increasingly massive. To understand what is hidden at the bottom of the ocean, we must first understand how the seas have reshaped the global map over the past 50,000 years. Today's Earth is in a warm interglacial period. But around 20,000 years ago, During the coldest peak of the last ice age, the entire planet looked completely different from any modern map. Sea levels back then were about 120 meters lower than today. A drop of 120 meters might not sound like much, but it was enough to turn a coastline into an entire continent. If you lower the global sea level by 120 meters and observe the world map again, you will find many regions completely unrecognizable. The British Isles of today were not islands at all. They were just the northwestern edge of a continuous landmass spanning the modern North Sea region, extending eastward and southward. Southeast Asia was not an archipelago of countless islands, but a massive subcontinent almost twice the size of India. The Persian Gulf did not exist. Northern Australia was connected to Papua New Guinea, and the vast shallow waters surrounding Cuba, the Bahamas, and the Yucatan Peninsula were all still dry land. Among these vanished ancient lands, the most intensely studied one has a specific name: Doggerland. Doggerland was once located where the southern North Sea is today, connecting Great Britain to the European continent. It was not the icy wasteland people might imagine. For a very long period, it possessed temperate lowland rivers, wetlands, forests, and abundant hunting resources. By any measure, it was one of the most fertile lands in northwestern Europe, and humans once lived there. For over a century, fishermen in the North Sea have continuously dredged up various artifacts from the seabed. Stone tools and processed antler products have all surfaced from depths of 30 to 40 meters. In 2018, a research team from the University of Bradford in the UK began systematically mapping Doggerland using seismic survey data left over from oil and gas exploration. As the data was pieced together, the complete profile of a lost continent gradually emerged. Ancient river valleys, dried lakebeds, and prehistoric coastlines all lie silently beneath today's North Sea. Doggerland did not disappear overnight. As glaciers continuously melted and sea levels steadily rose, it shrank little by little over thousands of years. But between 8,000 and 6,000 years ago, this process suddenly accelerated. A massive submarine landslide occurred off the coast of Norway, later known as the Storegga Slide. This disaster triggered a mega tsunami that swept across the entire North Sea. It likely inundated the last remaining landmass of Doggerland in just a few hours. If settlements truly existed there at the time, and archaeological evidence confirms human presence, then they had almost no chance to escape. However, Doggerland is just one example. A truly massive lost continent actually lies on the other side of the world. If you lower the global sea level by 120 meters and look at today's Southeast Asia, you will find that Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and Bali are no longer islands. They are merely highlands on the same massive continent. That landmass stretched south and west, integrating seamlessly with the Southeast Asian mainland, with an overall area approaching that of Western Europe. This lost continent has a formal name in geography and geology, Sundaland. However, it rarely appears in popular history books. For most of the past 50,000 years, Sundaland remained above sea level. It featured warm tropical plains, a crisscrossing network of rivers, and massive river systems now long submerged. There were coastlines, deltas, forests, and the incredibly rich biological resources of the tropics. Throughout those long ages, it was continuously inhabited by humans. Homo sapiens reached Southeast Asia roughly 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, perhaps even earlier. The ancestors of today's indigenous Australians and Melanesians crossed Sundaland at least 50,000 years ago, traveling along its edges to reach Australia. For them, Sundaland was not a migration corridor, but it was their very home. Furthermore, it was one of the largest and most biologically abundant regions on Earth at that time. Today, this homeland has sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Most of its territory lies quietly 40 to 100 meters beneath the Java Sea, the Strait of Malacca, and the South China Sea. If villages and settlements existed there back then, and human settlements almost always appear near rivers and coasts, then it is highly likely they are now sleeping on the seafloor. Geneticist Stephen Oppenheimer has spent years studying the mitochondrial DNA of populations in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. He discovered something that makes the traditional archaeological timeline difficult to explain. Genetic evidence shows that long before the currently accepted origin of civilization, population expansions, migrations, and cultural outward diffusions had already occurred in Southeast Asia. In 1998, Oppenheimer proposed his theory in the book Eden in the East. He argued that Sundaland was not just an inhabited landmass, but more likely a center of civilization. Later, as sea levels rose, massive waves of refugees left their homeland, spreading their knowledge, myths, and cultural memories to India, China, the Pacific Islands, and even the Middle East. This theory remains highly controversial today, but the genetic evidence supporting it has not been completely overturned. Whenever people discuss Sundaland, another piece of evidence is repeatedly brought up. That is the Great Flood myth. Almost all civilizations in the world have legends about a deluge. It was not normal heavy rain or a flooding river, but the ocean rising to engulf the entire world. A cataclysmic flood that destroyed everything ended the old era. Scholars of religion and mythology have long debated whether these flood myths originated from a single event or emerged independently. But if Sundaland was truly swallowed by floods, if Doggerland was truly destroyed by a mega tsunami, and if global coastlines retreated tens or even hundreds of kilometers within a single generation's memory at the end of the Ice Age, then perhaps all common ancestors of humanity witnessed the same kind of terror. They watched helplessly as the ocean devoured their world. Consequently, they told this story to their children, who passed it on to the next generation. Spanning 10,000 years and crossing continents and islands, the memory of that great flood has survived to this day. Regarding the origin of human civilization, mainstream academia has consistently adopted this specific timeline. Modern Homo sapiens emerged in Africa roughly 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. For a vast period thereafter, humans survived through hunting and gathering. It was not until 10,000 to 12,000 years ago that everything began to change. Agriculture emerged, settlements formed, social structures grew increasingly complex, and civilization, in the conventional sense, was born. This timeline deeply influences humanity's understanding of its own history. It is written into textbooks, repeatedly taught in schools, and supported by the vast majority of mainstream archaeological research. But there has always been a problem with it, because at Göbekli Tepe, what archaeologists excavated from beneath the hill completely defied everyone's expectations. Massive carved stone pillars emerged, the tallest exceeding 6 meters and weighing up to 20 tons. They formed circular enclosures covered with exquisite animal reliefs, abstract symbols, and humanoid patterns. The carving techniques were highly mature, and the entire site demonstrated highly unified planning capabilities, symbolic thinking, and immense organizational collaboration. According to the traditional timeline, none of this should have existed in that era. Göbekli Tepe dates back approximately 11,600 years. Furthermore, many popular accounts ignore an even stranger detail. This site was not naturally abandoned, but it was intentionally buried. At some point, someone actively filled the entire architectural complex with massive amounts of rubble and soil, covering it completely. That was not destruction, but a form of preservation. Someone deliberately hid Göbekli Tepe, and precisely because of this, it was preserved perfectly for 12,000 years. But the question arises, why bury such a magnificent structure? Frankly, no one currently knows the answer. However, scholars studying this site noticed another intriguing coincidence. The era when Göbekli Tepe was built and used exactly corresponds to the global flood period following the end of the Ice Age. That was exactly when Doggerland was gradually sinking and the coastlines of Sundaland were constantly retreating. Thus, someone proposed a bold hypothesis. What if Göbekli Tepe was not the beginning of a new era, but the endpoint of an old world? Or more accurately, what if it was a monument, a relic built by survivors to commemorate a lost world? Naturally, there is currently no evidence to prove this view. Yet the question lingers. If human civilization had already advanced enough to build Göbekli Tepe, what were they doing during the Ice Age? Where was civilization in the 40,000 plus years before that great flood arrived? Where did their cities go? If an answer truly exists, that answer is very likely at the bottom of the sea. Civilization always originates along the coasts. Whether it is Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, the Indus Valley, or China, early civilizations were almost all built on river deltas or coastal plains. Those locations possessed abundant fishery resources, ample fresh water, fertile alluvial soil, and natural trade routes. Yet the most fertile coastal areas on Earth during the Ice Age are now mostly submerged, 60 to 120 meters deep on the seafloor. The problem is, we have almost never truly looked for them. There are no large-scale surveys and no systematic expeditions, because underwater archaeology is extremely costly and the technological difficulties are immense. More importantly, it might touch upon a question that the mainstream timeline has always been reluctant to face. And Cuba is by no means the only case. Near Yonaguni Island at the southernmost tip of Japan, there is also a famous underwater ruin. Ever since local divers discovered it, the debate has never stopped. Japanese geologist Masaaki Kimura has been diving to study the Yonaguni underwater ruins for years. He believes this site exhibits at least signs of artificial modification and might even be a man-made architectural structure. He found traces resembling tool marks, grooves formed by artificial cutting, and an overall layout closely resembling step platforms or ceremonial structures. Naturally, another geologist proposed a different perspective. He believes these landforms could entirely be caused by the special crystalline structure of the local sandstone, where rocks naturally fracture along regular planes to eventually form what we see today. To this day, this debate remains unresolved, but one point is virtually undisputed. If the Yonaguni underwater site was indeed above land around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, which is entirely possible based on its current depth and known sea level change curves, then regardless of what it actually is, it existed in that era, and at that time, human activity was already present in this region. Further north on the seafloor of the Gulf of Kambat, off the western coast of India, the National Institute of Ocean Technology conducted marine surveys in 2001 and obtained a highly controversial set of sonar images. The footage revealed suspected geometric underwater ruins located at a depth of about 40 meters. Researchers also retrieved artifacts from the vicinity, including what were claimed to be artificially processed wood fragments. These organic materials were carbon-14 dated to approximately 9,500 years ago. After this discovery was announced, the Indian government was initially thrilled, but the international archaeological community quickly raised doubts. They questioned the accuracy of the dating methods and whether the interpretation of the sonar images involved misjudgments. To this day, this site has still not undergone any true systematic archaeological excavation. Meanwhile, off the coast of Alexandria in Egypt, there is another sunken ancient city named Herakleion. This time there is no controversy. It was indeed a real city. Archaeologists officially discovered it in the year 2000. This crucial ancient Egyptian port eventually sank to the seafloor due to the gradual subsidence of the delta foundation and soil liquefaction. Statues, temples, coins, and a massive number of everyday items continue to be unearthed from the seabed, and related archaeological work is still ongoing today. Herakleion cannot prove the existence of an unknown civilization before the Ice Age, as it belongs to archaeological discoveries of the historical era. However, it reminds people of another critical fact. An entire city can truly sink to the bottom of the sea and be preserved for a long time. The ocean does not destroy everything. Instead, it actually preserves many things. The real issue is not that underwater ruins do not exist, but that we have not yet seriously looked for them. Next, we must mention one of the greatest mysteries in ancient history, the Sea Peoples. Around 1200 BC, the entire Bronze Age civilized world suddenly collapsed. The then powerful ancient Egypt had to fight with all its might just to survive. The Hittite Empire, which had long contested for hegemony with Egypt, completely vanished within a single generation. Along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, city after city was burned and abandoned. Trade networks that had lasted for centuries completely disintegrated. The use of writing gradually declined, and populations plummeted. The entire region entered what historians call a dark age, which lasted for several centuries. All of this is connected to a group of mysterious visitors. Ancient Egyptian texts referred to them as the Sea Peoples, recording that they arrived by ships to attack coastal cities, bringing almost total chaos wherever they went. Yet to this day, no one truly knows who they were, where they came from, or why they suddenly appeared in such massive numbers at that specific time. Some researchers propose the view that the Sea Peoples might not have been distant invaders at all. They were more likely a group of refugees. Due to environmental disasters, flooded coastlines, or continuous seismic activity, they were forced to leave their homelands. They came to the coasts of Egypt and the Levant not to plunder, but because they simply had nowhere else to go. If a portion of these refugees truly came from lands that are now submerged, then we will never be able to find their true homeland, because their cities are already sleeping on the ocean floor. Any records they left behind, if they ever existed, have long since vanished. Thus, they brought a mystery to the Egyptian coast and disappeared into history, carrying that same mystery. Speaking of this, we cannot avoid a name that has been passed down for over 2,000 years, Atlantis. Around 360 BC, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato described it in detail for the first time in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias. He stated it was a powerful maritime civilization located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, deep within the Atlantic Ocean. Ultimately, it was completely swallowed by the sea in just a single day and night. For 2,500 years, people have debated what Plato truly meant to convey. Was it just a fable, a philosophical story about arrogance and destruction, or was there really some long-lost history behind it? Another perspective suggests that Atlantis might just be the distorted product of a different historical memory. For instance, around 1,600 BC, the Minoan civilization was destroyed by a volcanic eruption. Others believe it was entirely a literary fiction created by Plato from start to finish. Currently, mainstream academia generally supports the latter view. They believe Atlantis did not exist and was merely a fable created by Plato to express his philosophical ideas. The greatest advantage of this explanation is that there is no need to modify the existing timeline of human history. Yet one detail remains consistently intriguing. Plato explicitly wrote in his book that Atlantis was destroyed 9,000 years before his own era, which translates to roughly 9,600 BC. Many researchers have long noticed that this specific time point astonishingly corresponds exactly to the end of the Ice Age, a period of rapid global sea level rise. At that time, countless coastlines were being swallowed by the ocean. The problem is that Plato had absolutely no concept of an ice age. He knew nothing about rising sea levels, let alone modern climatology. Logically speaking, it would be almost impossible for him to so precisely place the story timeline exactly during the most dramatic coastal flooding period in Earth history purely by chance. Thus, only two possibilities remain. Either Plato inherited a much older tradition, preserving a story about the sea engulfing a civilization in the form of a philosophical dialogue, or this is simply an unbelievable coincidence in the history of literature. Neither explanation is completely convincing, but one thing is almost certain. For humans living near the coasts, the end of the Ice Age was indeed a true civilization-level catastrophe. Sea levels continuously rose, vast areas of land sank to the seafloor, and entire inhabited regions vanished forever. If relatively complex human settlements once existed in those areas, and a growing body of evidence seems to imply just that, then this destruction would definitely become the most profound collective memory in human history. Perhaps Atlantis is not the name of a specific city. It merely represents an event, the Great Flood that swallowed the world. On that day, the ocean took away the entire world. This memory is so colossal and so shocking that it has never truly left human civilization. It appears in Plato writings, in flood myths worldwide, and in the legends passed down generation by generation among coastal peoples in Australia, Asia, and the Americas. They are all telling the same story. The sea once rose, and the world once sank. In fact, exploring the seafloor using modern technology is not a new concept. Sonar scanning, remotely operated underwater vehicles, and underwater archaeology technologies have been developing for many years. The real problem has never been technology, but rather investment. The ocean floor is simply too vast. If we want to look for human settlements from before the Ice Age, the most worthwhile areas to investigate are actually the shallow continental shelves that were exposed above sea level between 20,000 and 8,000 years ago. The total area of such regions is about 27 million square kilometers, which is even larger than the entire African continent. Yet the areas that have truly received archaeological investigation account for only a tiny fraction of that. Glenn Milne, a geophysicist at Durham University in the UK, has spent years using models to reconstruct global coastline changes over the past 20,000 years. His research can precisely map the positions of global coastlines across different eras, which places were once land, where certain rivers once flowed, and which regions were most suitable for human habitation can all be calculated through these models. Today, a small number of underwater archaeologists have started using these models to search for target areas, and the results are becoming increasingly intriguing. Offshore in India, along the coasts of northern Europe, and in the Gulf of Mexico, suspected traces of human activity have been discovered in multiple areas predicted by models to have once been suitable for human habitation. These include stone tools, suspected architectural structures, and artificially modified ruins. More and more people are beginning to realize that true history might still be sleeping on the ocean floor, and we just have not found it yet. However, the funding available for such research is pitifully small. The mainstream academic community has always remained cautious about investing massive resources into finding these ruins. Because once it is truly discovered that a relatively advanced human civilization existed before the Ice Age, it means the existing timeline of human civilization will need to be rewritten. And the entire academic system, research directions, career developments, and even the allocation of scientific research funding are all built upon the current framework. Thus, the seafloor remains silent. At a depth of 600 meters in the Caribbean Sea, the mysterious geometric structures discovered by sonar scanning in 2001 have yet to be truly excavated. At a depth of 12 meters on the North Sea floor, stone tools and animal bones left by the inhabitants of Doggerland are constantly being scooped up by fishing nets. Yet there has never been a systematic archaeological plan to study where they truly came from. At a depth of 40 meters in the Java Sea, the ancient river valleys that once flowed across Sundaland also continue to quietly hide their own secrets. Humanity has sent probes to Mars and mapped the lunar surface in greater detail than many parts of our own ocean floor. We can now clearly see the internal structures of human cells, yet we have never truly and seriously searched the lands buried beneath shallow waters where our ancestors once lived. Some researchers believe this gap is no accident. They propose that if an advanced civilization from before the Ice Age is truly discovered, it would cause a massive impact on the existing academic system and historical framework. Therefore, the modern scientific establishment itself does not have much motivation to look for such evidence. This is not a conspiracy theory, but simply the most ordinary human nature. Very few people are willing to proactively invest resources into researching a direction that could overturn their entire academic foundation. Whether you accept this view or not, the result is actually the same. We do not know what exactly is hidden on the ocean floor because we have barely really started looking. Yet the things discovered in just a few seriously investigated places are already enough to show that human history is perhaps much longer more complex, and more tragically epic than what we recount today. At least a few things are certain. Today, beneath 120 meters of seawater, lies a vast expanse of land that was exposed above the ocean for the vast majority of the past 50,000 years. Humans once lived there. They hunted there, raised their offspring, and built their own homes. When the Ice Age ended, their world was swallowed by the ocean. And most of the traces they left behind now sleep on a seafloor that has never been systematically surveyed by archaeologists. We know that Göbekli Tepe, dating back about 11,600 years, already demonstrated highly organized architectural capabilities and a complex symbolic system. This makes the traditional story of human civilization origins seem incomplete. We know that almost all civilizations have passed down Great Flood myths with shockingly similar details that are hard to simply explain as independent creations. We also know that the massive geometric structures discovered by sonar on the Cuban seafloor have not undergone any true archaeological investigation to this day. We further know that the most fertile and suitable lands for human habitation during the Ice Age are now entirely submerged under the sea. What remains truly unknown is what exactly existed on those lands. Did the people living in Sundaland, the people living in Doggerland, and the people living on the Caribbean continental shelf have cities? Did they have writing? Did they develop social organizations that we today would call a civilization? Are those geometric structures on the Cuban seafloor just natural rock formations or lost ruins? Is the timeline left by Plato just a coincidence? Or is it an ancient memory spanning 10,000 years? No one knows, because we have never truly sought the answers. And the ocean itself is a unique place. It is cold, dark, and under immense pressure. But in many ways, it is actually much better suited for preserving ancient ruins than land. Things buried in seafloor sediments are far away from weathering, erosion, and surface biological activities, making it entirely possible for them to be preserved for an incredibly long time. If those pieces of evidence truly exist, they are still lying there quietly today, buried under 120 meters of seawater, covered by 10,000 years of silt, waiting for someone to rediscover them. The real question is not whether they exist, but whether we are willing to look for them. If entire continents can sink to the bottom of the sea, just how much history has humanity actually lost? If one day we truly find the answers, how will the entire history of civilization be altered as a result? As for you, do you believe that lost civilizations are still sleeping on the ocean floor? The story of civilizations submerged deep beneath the ocean is not just a collection of mysterious fragments from the past. It offers us a profoundly deep lesson in humility. Standing before the devastating power of Mother Nature and the eternal flow of time, even the greatest human achievements can be washed away and sink into oblivion. But at the same time, those mysteries also ignite the flame of curiosity within us, reminding us that the treasure trove of human knowledge is boundless. Never let fixed paradigms or outdated theories confine your thinking. The courage to ask questions, step out of your comfort zone, and relentlessly seek the truth is exactly what drives humanity forward. Of course, everything I have shared today on TIAN X Science is my personal perspective and analysis, carefully synthesized from various documentary sources. It could be absolutely right, or it could contain certain flaws. Science and history always remain an open canvas waiting for us to explore. So what do you think about these lost continents? Do you believe the ruins at the bottom of the sea are forgotten historical truths, or is it all just woven myths and fiction? Please leave your thoughts down below so we can analyze and dissect this topic together. And one more fascinating thing, I am truly curious to know from which country or city around the world you amazing science lovers of TIAN X Science are watching this video right now. Please drop your location in the comments and let me know. Thank you so much for staying with me until these final seconds. I will see all of you down in the comment section.